Hi, I'm Mike Pompeo. After much consideration and constant prayer, Susan and I have concluded that I will not be a candidate for the presidency of the United States in 2024.
Well, I mean, the timing was interesting because I was also at the Republican National Convention this week.
Yeah.
And there were people at that convention who I think would not have been there but for their belief that something was going to happen to Trump before he got there. That, Mitch McConnell and some other folks were there. I mean, Mike Pompeo, former head of the CIA, former State Department director, was telling delegates of Iowa, that were coming in to the event that he was going to be the vice presidential nominee. He was never on Trump's list, but he would have been on other people's list. I think the plan was to assassinate him right before the convention, blame it on Iran, use that as a rallying cry to go to war with Iran, and for the Republican Party to nominate Nikki Haley as president and Mike Pompeo as vice president. The two biggest sort of neocon deep state allies that were ever part of the Trump administration, in the name of defending the life and legacy of Trump, the nominating someone who is anti-Trump fundamentally, but would help promote the war. It would give Joe Biden an excuse for people to stop talking about how old he is and go. And I think they wanted to go to war with Iran. They thought Iran would step into Israel after October 7th. Iran didn't take the bait. And I think they needed something to accelerate that. They also know they're going to lose in Ukraine, so they need a new war to draw attention, and they need something to feed the military-industrial complex, all those weapons contracts and the like. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the timing was right before the convention. In addition, I think they had got word that Trump was not going to pick the vice president that they wanted him to pick, that the sort of deep state crowd wanted Trump to pick someone that would provide insurance for the deep state, that they could take Trump out at any time and know that the vice president was their ally. And that's who Tim Scott is. That's who Marco Rubio is. That's who Doug Burgum is. And Trump let them think that he might pick them, but it had been clear for about 3 weeks that J.D. Vance was in the lead. J.D. Vance is much more populist. He was anti the Ukraine war. He fought with the Marines in Iraq and felt he got lied to. I remember talking to him for about an hour and a half before he made the decision to come out against the Ukraine war back in March of 2022. And so I saw Karl Rove, whose hands were shaking with rage when he got the news that J.D. Vance was going to be the pick. So I think the goal on both sides of the deep state, the Republican and Democratic side, was to take Trump out before he could be officially the nominee, before J.D. Vance could be his official successor and vice presidential pick. And there's plenty of evidence that we have that either you have, one of the key things I always talk about in looking at whether something is a false flag. So like sometimes people misunderstand false flag to mean an event did not occur. A false flag is literally the old pirates would, post a false flag to be able to get real close to the ship they were going to raid, wait till they get right next to the ship, and then they bring up the old Jolly Roger. And it's surprise, surprise, we're not the British or the French or the Spanish or whoever you thought we were. So the culprit is not always correctly identified. And that doesn't always require that the culprit they blame not also be a culprit. It just means the narrative of the lone assassin, because America's unique in this respect. We're the only country that always seems to only have a lone assassin. Look at all the other people that get shot around the world, or as some attempted assassination. More often than not, there's some sort of conspiracy afoot, according to the official narrative. But the United States, it's always just some lone nut job that try to do something, so that they don't have to have meaningful complicity and culpability. But the way in which it happened, the evidence that's already developing, Chris Martinson's doing some great audio analysis work on this as we speak, strongly suggests that there were multiple shooters, that the key shots didn't come from the supposed assassin. At a minimum, you have massive security lapses. I always say that's a sign of a red flag of a staged event. A red flag of a false flag is unusual and unexpected security lapses. That suggests somebody on the inside is making sure certain events can occur. But it looks to me that there were probably multiple shooters, and they thought, and in fact, the shots were excellent shots from a sniper's perspective. But Trump just happened to turn his head at exactly the right time. I mean, within a millisecond. If he turns his head in any other different direction, he's dead. And but when he stood up and said, "Fight, fight, fight," I think that was Trump's way of signaling to everybody he knew who and what was behind the assassination attempt. And since then, he's talking to Robert Kennedy about incorporating Kennedy's vaccine policy, and that gets conveniently leaked to the public. He's talking to Robert Kennedy about what happened and how Joe Biden had some unusual questions afterwards. Like, why did you turn your head, Don? Almost like someone complaining about why isn't he dead? He picks J.D. Vance. He accelerates his nomination to Monday afternoon rather than Thursday afternoon. So I think Trump, and I've talked to Don Jr. and some other people, I think they understand who it is that wants Trump out of the way. And I think their failure to get him is going to backfire on them in public policy in a whole bunch of ways. But I have zero doubts that it was at some level an inside job.
When I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CIA director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses. It reminds you of the glory of the American experiment.